Hi, and welcome to Reimagining Chapel. My name is Amanda Esco, and I am the director of the Religious Education Program here at the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. Thanks for joining us today. Let's start off by lighting our chalice. If you have one of our flower pot chalices at your home, go get it and then light it with me. Ooh, sometimes it takes 3 times the charm. Symbol of light, symbol of knowledge, symbol of warmth, symbol of freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love. This month in religious education, we are exploring the idea of stillness in this season and how we breathe through it. Sometimes it's by stopping, listening, and being very quiet, like we practiced last week. Sometimes it's being still in the traditions that we have, that we love. This year, a lot of our traditions are being altered. That does not mean, though, that we're not still practicing them, either with smaller groups of people or just our own family. Our traditions help keep us grounded in who we are, and we can find stillness and peace in that. Today, we're going to learn about a Unitarian who kind of invented the idea of Christmas, or re-brought it back into the forefront in England and the United States, and hear his beloved story. So, I'm glad you're here today. Let's start off by doing the body prayer that we learned a couple weeks ago. You ready? If you're able, stand up with me. We're going to put our hands in front of our heart center. We're going to take in a deep breath, remembering that we need to listen to our heart. We're going to hold our hands out, take a deep breath in and out, and remember to serve others. We're going to lift our hands up over our heads, stretching, reminding us that we are one with the universe. Bringing our hearts back down to heart center, one with ourselves. Thanks for joining me in those body prayers. Body prayer, meditation, taking a moment to breathe is all a way to find stillness in our very busy lives. Another way that we can find stillness is by sharing what's in our hearts. It's time for joys and concerns. Find someone who is near you, pet, parent, sibling, and tell them what's on your heart. What's going well? What's not going well? What are you looking forward to doing this season? Share those things with them right now, and I'll be here waiting for you. Thank you for sharing your joys and concerns with the people that love you the most. They want to hear what's in your hearts and in your head. So, good job sharing it. Now, let's learn about this Unitarian who really changed the way we do Christmas. Thanks, Lissa.
The Religious Education Assistant at the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. Our UU of the week this time is Charles Dickens, the revered author of A Christmas Carol. Charles Dickens has been called the greatest author of the Victorian era. He was born in England in 1821, and he lived in comfort at times as well as great poverty. Dickens had to leave school when he was very young because his parents could not afford the fees. His father was even put in jail because he owed so much money, and so Charles had to go to work in a factory to support his family. When his father later inherited money, he was finally released from prison. As they repaired their financial and social standing, Charles's father pointed to a big fancy house, and he said, "If you work hard enough, you could live in that house someday. And Charles did. He became a journalist and later an author who worked so much and published so many books that he was able to buy that very house that his father pointed at. Charles Dickens never forgot his past, though, and he used his writing to shine a light on inequity, meaning when things aren't equal for people living in the same place. He wrote about characters who were relatable and likable, and then put them in desperate situations to highlight the many hardships of living in Victorian England, like debtors' prisons and poorhouses. Dickens was able to engage readers of every class and help them to learn more about the other people around them. He enticed upper-class readers by writing fondly about comforts in life, and he also made his writing accessible to the poor by publishing stories in short installments, which were much cheaper than a whole book. Writing his stories in a serial format like that also allowed him to listen to feedback about his characters from his readers, because they read him in short pieces, and then he wrote it again and then wrote another chapter. And he even changed some of his characters for the better based on that feedback, which I think is a really interesting way to write, even so long ago. Later in his life, Charles Dickens became a Unitarian. We have learned that the Unitarians in England were fiery dissenters at that time. Dickens did visit Boston with his family in 1842, and he found the Transcendentalists a bit amusing, even poking fun at them in his writing. But eventually he came around to appreciate them before he returned to England. Shortly after his conversion to Unitarianism and his trip to Boston, Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol. The story highlights many themes near and dear to Unitarian hearts, like the value of spreading kindness in this life right now, just for the sake of helping the people around you. Old Scrooge was inspired to build a living legacy of people who would remember his charity and kindness rather than being forgotten and despised, like the frightful visions the ghosts had shown him. As good as Dickens was at creating likable characters who taught empathy, he was not as good at his real life. He married young and had 10 children, but he grew tired of his wife and replaced her with a younger woman. He doted on his children when they were small, but as adults, Dickens found his children unimpressive. That's his word, not mine. Dickens worked hard and died basically alone in 1870 at the age of 49, which sort of sounds like he failed to heed his own lessons in A Christmas Carol. But he did leave a legacy of literature which acts as a rule book for influencing social change, which is still invaluable today. Thanks for joining me in learning more about our UU of the Week, Charles Dickens.
Let's see what's inside my Wonder Box today. Woohoo! We have some Christmas flowers. As we learned from Lissa, Charles Dickens was a Unitarian. Our friends at the Quest for Meaning wrote this about him. When Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol in 1843, many Christmas traditions had completely died out, and the holiday was hardly celebrated. England was becoming more and more industrial, and people were leaving family farms to go work in factories and had left their old customs behind. But Dickens' story, which was wildly popular, brought enthusiasm back to the cities for practices like singing Christmas carols and feasting on special foods. The picture of the poor family celebrating their Christmas together inspired people to find new ways to celebrate Christmas in the cities. And the change of heart which comes to Ebenezer Scrooge reminded people that Christmas traditionally was a time when the wealthy folks shared with poorer people. In fact, Dickens was very concerned with the conditions of poor people in England at the time, when the gap between the rich and the poor was getting wider and wider. Many of his books dealt with this theme, and he became a Unitarian because, as he said, they would do something for human improvement if they could, and practice charity and toleration. Today, we'll end Reimagining Chapel with a retelling of this classic Christmas story, which inspired many of the traditions we have today, A Christmas Carol, with illustrations by Brett Hellquist.
Ebenezer Scrooge was a mean old miser who thought that Christmas was nothing but humbug. "If I could work my will," said Scrooge indignantly, "every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through their heart." This was not a good start to the Christmas festivities, particularly for Scrooge's poor clerk, Bob Cratchit, who has a wife and family he would like to be with on Christmas Day. He also has a son named Tiny Tim, who is very ill and might not live to see another Christmas. Scrooge leaves his office that day with a humbug toward poor Bob Cratchit. That night, when Scrooge is alone in his bed, he's visited by the ghost of his dead business partner, Jacob Marley, who was wrapped in chains, weighed down by the burdens of the life that he had misspent with greed. Marley had come to warn Scrooge that if he didn't change his ways, he too would end up in the same predicament. He foretold that 3 spirits would visit Scrooge, the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, that they would show Scrooge what he must do to save himself and the others around him. At the stroke of one, the first spirit appeared like a child, dressed in white, carrying fresh green holly. "Who and what are you?" Scrooge demanded. "I am the ghost of Christmas past." "Long past?" inquired Scrooge. "Your past," replied the ghost. The ghost takes Scrooge back to when he was a boy and reminds him of how alone he was and how he lost the love of his life with his greed. "Spirit," said Scrooge in a broken voice, "remove me from this place. I told you these were the shadows of the things that have been," said the ghost. "They are what they are. Do not blame me." "Remove me!" Scrooge exclaimed. "I cannot bear it!" And suddenly, Scrooge was back, alone in his bed. Within moments, the second ghost appeared. "Is this the ghost of Christmas present?" The spirit takes Scrooge to see Christmas at Bob Cratchit's home, where Tiny Tim is failing fast. Sitting very close to his father's side, Bob held his withered little hand in his, as he loved the child and wished to keep him by his side forever. "Spirit," said Scrooge with an interest he had never felt before, "tell me, if Tiny Tim will live?" "I see a vacant seat," replied the ghost, "in the corner, and a crutch without the owner." "No, no, no," said Scrooge. "Oh no, kind spirit, say he will be spared." The ghost was gone. The chimes were ringing. Scrooge remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley and beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground toward him. "I am in the presence of Christmas yet to be," said Scrooge. The spirit nodded in an answer, but pointed onward with his hand. Although he was used to the ghost company by now, Scrooge feared the silent shape, and he found that he could barely stand to follow it. "Will you not speak to me?" It gave him no reply. The city seemed to spring up around them. The specter gestured to a knot of a businessman. I don't know much about it, said the fat man with a monstrous chin. I only know he's dead. It's likely to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my life I don't know anybody who would go to it, said another. Scrooge did not know what to make of the conversation. It could not be about the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was the past, and his ghost province was the future. The spectre led Scrooge to a low-down shop, where the woman was untying a heavy bundle. "Bed curtains," said the shopkeeper. "You don't mean to say that you took him down, rings and all, with him lying there dead?" "Yes, I do," replied the woman. "If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, he'd have somebody looking after him, instead of gasping there, left all by himself. Ha!" Scrooge shuddered from head to foot. The scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bare bed, on which upon a ragged sheet there lay, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, the body of a man. "Let us leave this fearful place," Scrooge cried. "Spectre," said Scrooge after they had gone, "tell me what man that was there they were lying dead." The phantom led him across the graves of a churchyard, pointed down to one. "Answer me one question first," said Scrooge. "Are these the shadows of things that will be, or are they the shadows of things that might be?" Still the ghost pointed, as immovable as ever. Scrooge crept forward, trembling as he went, and read upon the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. "Am I that man who lay upon this bed?" he cried. "No, spirit! Oh, no, no! I am not that man I was. I will honor Christmas in my heart. I will keep it all year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall live within me. Oh, tell me, how may I wipe away the writing from this stone?" Holding his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, Scrooge saw a change in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down to a bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own! The bed was his own, the room was his own, best and happiest of all. The things before him were all his, and he now could make amends. Scrooge opened the window. "What's today?" he called down to a boy on the street. "Why, Christmas Day," replied the boy. "I haven't missed it," said Scrooge himself. "My fine fellow, do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging in the next street?" "What, the one as big as me?" returned the boy. "Go, buy it, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown." The boy was off like a shot. "I'll send it to Bob Cratchit," whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hands and spitting with laughter. "He shan't know who sent it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Ha, ha, ha!" Really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh. After sending off the turkey, Scrooge dressed himself in all his best and set out for his nephew Fred's house. It was a mercy his nephew didn't shake his arm off when he arrived. Scrooge felt at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful happiness. Scrooge was early at the office the next morning. "Hello!" he pretended to growl when Bob Cratchit arrived a few minutes late. "What do you mean by coming in here at this time of day?" It's only once a year, sir," pleaded Bob. "It shan't be repeated." "I'm not going to stand for this sort of thing, and therefore," Scrooge said, leaning from his stool, "a Merry Christmas to you, Bob, a merrier Christmas than I have ever given you. I'll raise your salary," he continued, with an earnestness that could not be mistaken. "And what can I do to assist your struggling family?" Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became a good friend, a good master, and a good as man as any old man knew in the city. And he was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas as well as anyone alive. May that truly be said of us all. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, every one.
Thank you for joining us today. To find out more information about the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City, please visit us at slcuu.org. But until next time, let's heart out.
One, each person is important. Two, be kind in all you do. Three, help each other.